Imagine this for a moment, a force so subtle, so elusive, that it quietly enters your life without warning. It begins by shaping your thoughts, twisting your desires, and subtly steering your ambitions, all while you remain unaware of its growing presence. This force, once unnoticed, slowly starts to command your attention, pull you deeper into its grasp, and influence the very course of your decisions. It masquerades as pleasure, a source of joy and satisfaction, but in reality, it's enslaving your will, keeping you trapped in an endless cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. This force, one that has toppled entire civilizations, destroyed the lives of great men, and left countless souls in ruins, might be one of the most powerful forces known to humanity. But here's the twist: what if overcoming this force isn't just possible? What if, by conquering this subtle, insidious force, you could unlock the most liberating, transformative act a human being can ever achieve? Just think about that for a moment. The key to freedom may lie in overcoming this force, and I'm talking about lust. Now, you might be thinking, isn't lust just a natural feeling? A basic human impulse? But let me assure you, this is not a message of suppression or condemnation of desire. No, this is about reclaiming your true power. It's about breaking free from the illusions that lust weaves into the very fabric of your thoughts, your choices, and even your identity. Lust is not merely a matter of sexual desire. It's far more complex. It's the hunger for possession, the craving for stimulation, and the desperate need for escape. A hunger that feeds on your attention and leaves your soul empty, constantly searching for meaning. This journey we're embarking on today isn't just about understanding lust on the surface. We're diving deep into the hidden truths that have been passed down through the ages, echoing in the minds of sages, philosophers, and psychologists throughout history. From Plato's Reflections to modern thinkers like Carl Jung, one truth has been clear: when desire takes control of the mind, reason becomes its servant, and the self becomes its prisoner. This is not a trivial matter. The stakes are high, and the consequences are real. But here's the good news: by the end of this exploration, you will not only gain powerful insights but also begin the path toward mastery over this force. And the final revelation, the most profound truth of all, could very well change the way you perceive your inner world, your desires, and your place in the universe forever. Have you ever experienced that moment when lust disguised itself as love? Perhaps it promised happiness and fulfillment, only to leave you feeling emptier than before. How many times has lust whispered in your ear, urging you to take just one more step, one more click, one more indulgence? How often have you found yourself chasing satisfaction, only to be met with a deeper, gnawing hunger that never seems to go away? Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, argued that much of human behavior is driven by unconscious desires, primarily sexual in nature. According to Freud, suppressing these desires leads to neurosis. But Carl Jung, Freud's protege turned critic, offered a more nuanced approach. He suggested that the key to personal evolution is not about repressing these primal urges, but confronting and integrating them. By bringing these desires into our consciousness and transforming them, we don't simply suppress them, we transcend them. This process of transformation, which Jung called individuation, is essential for self-mastery. It is not about denying desires, but about facing them, understanding their origins, and using them as fuel for growth, creativity, and even transcendence. Lust, as one of the most powerful shadows of the psyche, must be faced, acknowledged, and transmuted. Have you ever wondered why so many spiritual traditions speak of chastity, self-discipline, or celibacy? These aren't rules to oppress or restrict, but rather pathways to power and clarity. In Hindu philosophy, the practice of brahmacharya encourages the preservation of one's vital energy, avoiding compulsive indulgence and fleeting pleasures. In Christian mysticism, saints viewed lust as a veil over the soul's true vision. In Buddhism, craving is seen as the root of all suffering. Across cultures and spiritual practices, the message remains the same: there is freedom beyond desire. But overcoming lust doesn't simply mean resisting it. It's about understanding it. It's about sitting with it, observing its movements in your mind, and asking the tough questions. Where does this desire come from? What pain or void is it trying to soothe? Is this truly about pleasure, or is there something deeper at play? Fear? Loneliness? Inadequacy? When we examine lust more closely, we see that it often arises not from abundance, but from lack. It's not about love, it's about longing. Lust promises connection, but it delivers isolation. And in today's hypersexualized world, flooded with images of instant gratification, lust doesn't lead to freedom. It breeds addiction. Our society, with its algorithms and data-driven systems, is designed to keep us chasing pleasure, never fully satisfied, always reaching for the next quick fix. The machine of consumerism feeds on our cravings, keeping us distracted from what really matters: our purpose, our peace, our presence. But here's the question that few ever ask: what would your life look like if you were no longer ruled by lust? Pause and reflect. What decisions have I made, or avoided, because of lust? What relationships have I entered, stayed in, or even destroyed because of it? How much of my mental energy am I spending chasing illusions, rather than embracing the present moment? These questions aren't easy, but they are the doorway to your liberation. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that we have power over our minds, but not over external events. Realizing this truth grants us strength. The Stoics taught that true freedom doesn't come from indulging every impulse, but from mastering them. And mastery begins with awareness. So what exactly is lust? It's not just a biological impulse, it's a psychological construct. Lust is how we relate to the idea of pleasure. It's the promise of escape, the illusion of wholeness through external stimulation. Lust convinces us that satisfaction is just out of reach, always just one step beyond our grasp. But here's the shift that will change everything. When you realize that nothing external can ever complete you, you reclaim your power. When you finally understand that your craving isn't for a body, a fleeting image, or a cheap thrill, but for something much deeper: connection, meaning, transcendence, you begin to wake up. And once you start to wake up, the world can no longer control you because the world is fueled by lust. Lust drives consumerism, it fuels social media, it manipulates marketing, and it keeps us in a constant state of distraction. But you were not born to chase shadows, you were born to become light. And if you still think this is all just about physical desire, think again. Lust isn't limited to sexual attraction, it's a reflection of how we relate to all things: power, status, approval, novelty. It's the endless craving for more, the dissatisfaction with the present moment, and the hunger that never seems to end. To overcome lust is to reclaim the present moment. It's about silencing the craving and listening to the soul. Imagine what your life would look like if you were no longer seduced by every passing desire. How much energy would you free up? What clarity would you gain? And what kind of person would you become? This is your invitation, not to suppress your desires, but to transcend them. Not to escape desire, but to transform it into something greater, something more meaningful. The world will always try to lure you with its glittering illusions, but once you know it is truly real, you can never be fooled again. And as we journey deeper into this exploration, we'll uncover how ancient wisdom and modern science converge to reveal one undeniable truth: overcoming lust doesn't just free you from suffering. It unlocks a deeper, more powerful force within you, one that very few people ever truly discover. What happens when you stop being a slave to your impulses? When you no longer let fleeting cravings dictate the direction of your life, you reclaim something most people have lost for years: sovereignty over yourself. Let's dive deeper. Neuroscience has now confirmed what sages have known for millennia: compulsive behavior rewires the brain. Every time you give into a lustful impulse, you reinforce a feedback loop in your brain. Your dopamine spikes, rewarding the behavior temporarily, but over time, your baseline of satisfaction drops. What once thrilled you now feels mundane, and you find yourself needing more and more to feel the same rush. This is not freedom, this is addiction dressed as desire. Dr. Anna Lamb, a psychiatrist and professor at Stanford University, explains in her book Dopamine Nation how modern society, with its endless stimulation and pleasure, creates a paradox: the more we chase pleasure, the more pain we experience. This happens because the brain seeks balance. Overstimulating the pleasure centers causes the brain to dull its response, leaving you numb, restless, and empty. This is where lust becomes truly dangerous. Not because desire itself is inherently bad, but because unchecked desire slowly erodes your ability to be present, to be whole, and to be free. Take a moment and think about your own life. How often have you reached for something, a screen, a fantasy, a person, not because it brought you joy, but because you were trying to escape discomfort? How often has lust become your escape hatch, your way of avoiding boredom, anxiety, or your own silence? Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant psychologists in history, once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Lust, when left unconscious, becomes a silent puppeteer, pulling your strings while you think you're in control. To overcome lust is to take back control. It's not a path of shame, it's a path of strength, and it begins with the courage to sit with discomfort, to observe your desires without letting them consume you. In the end, the transformation we seek isn't about suppressing our desires, it's about transcending them. When we learn to harness our energy, our passions, and our impulses, we unlock our full potential. So ask yourself, what would your life look like if you could finally reclaim your power? The journey toward mastery begins now. In the last section, we explored the power of transmuting lust into something greater, more purposeful. We began to touch on the sacred potential within us all, how transforming base desires into elevated intentions can lead to a life of true mastery. But now, let's dive even deeper. Imagine waking up each day, free from the fog of regret, cravings, and distractions. Imagine living in clarity, your energy aligned, and your purpose clear. But the most crucial question of all remains: who would you become if you were no longer driven by hunger? I'm not just talking about sexual desire here. I'm talking about every form of craving, emotional, spiritual, existential. Who are you without the constant pull of longing? This is the deeper layer of the journey, and it's where everything begins to shift. What if I told you that the very energy you've been giving to lust can be transformed into the fuel for your greatest aspirations? That same energy, when transmuted, can propel you to greatness, to love, to a kind of inner freedom that so few ever truly experience. This is where the ancient practice of alchemy meets modern psychology, where the mysticism of old blends seamlessly with the understanding of the mind. And it's not just about discipline, it's about unlocking something far more profound, deep, abiding joy. This is not a far-off dream, but something that is accessible to all of us, if we choose to face it. Are you ready to take the step? What if I told you that lust, when properly understood and transmuted, could become the fuel that drives the very greatness you seek? Imagine no longer seeing lust as something to be feared or shunned, but as something to be faced, understood, and mastered. Think of it as fire, in its raw form. It's destructive, wild, and uncontrollable. But when contained, it becomes a source of light, warmth, and power. In ancient alchemy, there's a process called transmutation, the transformation of base elements into noble ones. Symbolically, this represents the inner transformation of a person. Turning base desires into higher purpose. Turning lust into love. Turning craving into clarity. Turning chaos into power. And let's be clear, this isn't just a metaphor. This is a process that you can feel in your body, see in your thoughts, and manifest in your actions. This is real, and it's happening right now, in every choice you make. Let's begin with the body. The same vital energy that lust hijacks is the very energy that fuels our creativity, our vitality, and our ambition. In many Eastern traditions, this energy is known by names like Kundalini, Chi, or Prana. In modern terms, you might simply call it your life force. It's not mystical, it's biological, psychological, and spiritual all at once. Think of your attention as currency. Every time you give in to lustful escapism, whether through pornography, compulsive fantasies, or empty hookups, you're spending that currency. You're leaking your energy. But here's the game changer: when you learn to contain that energy, when you allow it to build, something remarkable begins to happen. You begin to feel different. You start to glow. Your mind becomes sharper, your spirit stronger. This is what the ancients meant when they spoke of sacred retention. In Taoist practices, sexual energy is preserved and recycled through breathwork and meditation, fortifying the body, mind, and spirit. It's not about repression, it's about mastery. This isn't about saying no to life, but about saying yes to your true potential. And here's the truth that most people never realize: when you stop scattering your energy, you begin to concentrate it. And concentrated energy becomes power, creative power, intellectual power, spiritual power. Why do you think so many great thinkers, inventors, and artists spoke of discipline and purity during their most productive periods? They weren't denying life, they were aligning with it. They chose depth over distraction, clarity over chaos. Take Leonardo da Vinci, for example. Known for his exceptional focus and unparalleled genius, he is believed to have practiced celibacy, not because he lacked desire, but because he refused to be enslaved by it. Nikola Tesla, whose inventions revolutionized the world, once said, "I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men." Though controversial, his words hint at something deeper. Solitude and self-mastery often open doors to insight and creativity that lust and attachment can obscure. Now, think about your own potential. What would your days look like if you woke up without the fog of regret or compulsive cravings? What would you create if your mind was clear and your energy aligned? What relationships would you attract, not out of need, but from a place of overflow? Because that's what happens when lust transforms into love. I'm not talking about romantic love, but love in its purest form, love of truth, love of beauty, love of purpose. You begin to move through life with an energy that's rooted in something far greater than fleeting desires. Let's revisit Carl Jung's teachings. Jung believed that the energy of the libido, which he defined far beyond sexual desire, is the very fuel of the psyche. When this energy is not allowed to mature, it becomes neurosis. But when it is integrated, it leads to transformation. This is the essence of individuation, the process of becoming the person you're truly meant to be by integrating every fragmented part of yourself, including your desires. When lust is left unchecked, it thrives in the shadows, feeding on shame and secrecy. But when acknowledged, owned, and redirected, lust becomes a source of power. It becomes the rocket fuel of evolution. Now, let's be honest, this path is not easy. It requires vigilance, honesty, and patience. But the rewards? They are extraordinary. The moment you begin to live from intention rather than impulse, the entire architecture of your life begins to change. You become magnetic, grounded, unshakable. No longer are you chasing pleasure. Instead, you start creating meaning. But that's not all. Now let's talk about what it means to love in the absence of lust. True intimacy is often confused with lust, but they are not the same thing. Lust seeks to take, while intimacy seeks to understand. Lust consumes the image of the other person, intimacy embraces the soul of another. When you overcome lust, you don't stop desiring, you start desiring rightly. You see others not as objects, but as mirrors. Not as commodities, but as companions. Not as fantasies, but as beings. This shift changes everything: your friendships, your romantic relationships, your place in the world. Because when you're no longer ruled by hunger, you're moved by purpose. This is what the mystics call agape, a love that transcends the physical and touches the eternal. Saint Augustine, a man who once wrestled deeply with lust, later discovered that true satisfaction lies not in the gratification of the senses, but in the anchoring of the soul. As he wrote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." The restlessness that drives us toward lust isn't inherently wrong, it's a signal, a longing for the infinite, dressed in the garments of the temporary. Overcoming lust is not about becoming less human. It's about becoming fully human. It's about rising from compulsion into clarity, from craving into communion, and from reaction into revelation. And this is where our journey takes us. The highest transmutation of all, turning lust not just into power or presence, but into transcendence. The hidden teachings of sacred sexuality offer a path to freedom that few ever truly explore. This final key unlocks the soul from bondage and opens the gate to true inner freedom. Because the one who overcomes lust doesn't just overcome temptation. He or she overcomes illusion. They overcome distraction. They overcome the machinery that binds humanity to suffering. They overcome the world. Are you ready to receive the final revelation? To overcome the world is not to reject it. It is to no longer be ruled by it. It's about walking through its illusions without being deceived. It's about holding desire without being possessed by it. It's about seeing clearly where others are blinded by appetite. And here lies the final revelation: lust, in its most seductive form, is not about sex. It's about escape. It's the refusal to be present with what is. And that, more than anything, is what chains us to suffering. Everything you chase, the images, the fantasies, the quick fixes, isn't really about the things themselves. It's about your attempt to bypass the pain of being here, now, with yourself. As the monk Thich Nhat Hanh once said, the present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. But lust removes that attentiveness. It pulls you out of the present moment and traps you in the not yet. The true battle, then, isn't against desire itself, but against unconsciousness. And that is why overcoming lust is not just moral advice, it is spiritual liberation. To master lust is to reclaim your presence. To feel every sensation without being dominated by it. To experience longing without losing your center. To stand in the fire of temptation without being burned. In the great spiritual traditions, from Zen Buddhism to Christian mysticism, we find this same teaching again and again. The path to freedom lies not in indulgence or repression, but in awareness. And awareness transforms everything. When you become aware of your desire, you can investigate it. You can ask, what am I truly hungry for? What wound is this urge trying to soothe? What truth am I avoiding? And in that honest inquiry, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see that your desires are not your enemy. They are your teachers. They show you where you are divided. They show you what you fear. They show you what you have yet to love in yourself. This is the key. Because the final stage of this journey, the highest transmutation, is love. Not romantic love. Not the love of possession or attachment, but the love that holds all parts of yourself in compassion, even the parts that feel unworthy, ashamed, or addicted. Healing doesn't come through shame. It comes through seeing fully, clearly, and tenderly, and choosing to stay. To stay with your discomfort. To stay with your emptiness. To stay with your humanity. From that place of radical presence, something begins to shift. Lust dissolves, not because you fought it, but because you outgrew it. Like a child who no longer needs a toy, you begin to realize that the thrill was never the thing you wanted. You wanted to feel alive. You wanted to feel whole. You wanted to feel love. And now, you no longer seek it in illusions. You find it in the stillness of your own being. This is the ultimate overcoming. The world, with all its distractions, seductions, and false promises, no longer has power over you. You are no longer chasing ghosts. You are no longer craving things that break you. You are no longer trying to escape yourself. You are here. And that presence, quiet, unwavering, grounded, is what all spiritual masters point to when they speak of enlightenment. It is not some distant state. It is the return to your original self, untouched, uncorrupted, whole.